I think the 10,000 hour thing also, right? As you pointed out, it applies to a different time frame. And also, like you said, but very specific kind of repetitive knowledge. So, for maybe like a sports athlete or something like that. But 10,000 out doesn't make them an expert either. But it's about continuous, focused, repetitive action. And then, like you said, constantly learning and building upon that, right?
Yep.
I've learned as much in when did I leave? Oh my God, what year is it? We're in 2020? 2020. So in the 3 years since I've started Globacap, I've learned more in those 3 years than I perhaps did in some ways over the 18 years that I spent it.
Yeah, I can absolutely go with that one.
Some of that was just mundane, repetitive stuff, just creating pitch decks for deals.
We've got Alex, COO and CCO and founder of Globacap, with us today, speaking about how to fundraise, digitize, issue securities, and future-proof your business, and basically de-paper. So, Alex, I'll let you speak and share.
All right, thanks very much. Thanks, Erica, very much for asking us to participate. I appreciate it. I hope everyone's safe and well in this environment. Tough situation we're all dealing with, and everybody's kind of adjusting to whatever that new normal is going to be that's kind of constantly evolving and changing on a daily basis. So we're going to talk about just some thoughts and ideas that people should keep in mind, around fundraising. And some of these are just in an always situation, but some specific things maybe that we've seen and what we're hearing from some clients that have been doing raises on our platform, and just from the general kind of investing community as well on the evolving situation. So I'm going to talk about fundraising in a pandemic. Real quickly, so as Erica mentioned, one of the co-founders of Globacap. Globacap's about simplifying and driving efficiency in private capital markets, so users or customers can be freed up to focus on their growth or the task at hand, as opposed to being kind of overburdened with a lot of administrative processes. We started Globacap in November 2017. That was myself and Miles Milston, who's our CEO. And we focus mainly around two products, so fundraising management, streamlining that entire process, and then registrar services, cap table management, but it's more than just cap table management, which we'll get into later. And it's a digital automated process, and we use blockchain, and I'll get into some of that. So it's about how, not making it about us, but maybe just using us as one of the examples. There's other platforms that do similar things, but what the benefits of having kind of digital raises are, as well as digitizing your shares or creating a natively digital security, which some people have referred to as STOs or securities, but a security is a security is a security. So fundraising in this environment, you want to think about, in today's economically uncertain environment, there's no room for complacency when it comes to raising funds. I don't think there ever is really any room for complacency. But, the needs are shifting, and there's the need to work harder to appeal to investors as their priorities change and shift and evolve. While, the fundraising during these times can absolutely be daunting, but, I think it is about just getting out there and taking action and moving forward with it. There are tools at one's disposal, and you can still secure funds in this environment. We've seen people doing it. Of course, everything is just going to be a little bit more difficult, even as the working environment. We've all moved to work from home structure, but luckily we're still able to participate in webinars like this one. So there are solutions out there, and hopefully we'll talk about some of those tools at disposal. So there's a checklist here. The first thing is that you don't want to give up. Raises are happening, and there's just a need to be resourceful when you're resource constrained. Be resourceful. You want to think about structuring correctly. Make sure that it makes sense. Don't go out there with structuring something that is overvalued or a complex structure that will just turn off investors. You need to keep it simple in this environment. Utilize an existing network. A lot of people forget some of those. That goes back to the being resourceful. Existing shareholders, for example. A lot of people forget about their existing shareholder network at times. It might sound rather strange, but you do. And the more people that know about what you're doing beforehand, well, then the better situated that you can be when you're actually going out to execute, or they can introduce you to people. People know people. Again, then there's maximize your resources. You can use platforms that can boost efficiency. There's not just our platform, but there are other digital raising platforms. There's some crowdfunding platforms, of course. Everybody knows about those, the two large ones in the UK. So you want to maximize any resources by using some of these these platforms that can compress workflow and admin burden. So make it easier for yourself to actually get to your goal. And then the realistic numbers, run the numbers, be realistic. You got to work. Everything's going to be reworked in this environment. Nothing's going to stay the same. Your run rates are going to change. Everything's going to change. Execute, and then have a plan. Have a plan and execute on it, and just, it goes back to that don't give up and just get it going. Other points to remember, you cannot avoid talking about the current environment we're in. You have to have a clear plan and address that. Make that very clear. Make it clear that you've adjusted numbers in your deck. Make it clear that you've accounted for a very bad scenario, because that's what people will want. It'll add credibility. If you do not address it, then people will just assume that you have not thought about it and you're not prepared. Startups are agile, right? So try to focus on some of the positives in this environment. Startups are agile. We can reduce office space. All of us are working from home now. So if you're able to cut costs there, but then also think about the new normal. How efficient is this environment for you in a work from home setting? Do you actually need those offices anymore? Be flexible with costs. Larger businesses have less ability to do this. So in some ways, startups can be better positioned because of that agility they have. And again, what I'm talking about here, focusing on the benefits. What does that new future look like for you? Why are you better placed? Create a narrative around that. So try to take this environment and I don't want to say spin, but create a narrative of why that's interesting for you, or how you are situated and where you're placed in this environment. So just those are some of those things to think about here. General considerations: be able to move quickly. There are investors out there, and some of them will be getting cold feet. So you want to be able to, again, that's about agility as well, but agility in your actual fundraise as well. Move fast. If somebody wants to give you money, be prepared. So that's why, hopefully today's checklist will just kind of, highlight some ideas that you've probably already thought about, but these are points to focus on. Fundraising is realistic right now. We've seen people executing. We've had one investor that raised a round, closed it 2 weeks ago, right when this thing was kind of just starting to spiral out of hand and everybody was already working from home. So it is realistic. They just had to do some of these things. They had to readjust and refocus. So it goes about turning to investors that principal investors, some of them that you can trust. You can even turn to some of your largest customers, perhaps. If you're really delivering value-added solutions to them, well, then they have a vested interest in your business as well. And we talked about reaching out to network of shareholders, let them know what's happening, cast your net wide. Don't limit yourself here in this environment, and in terms of structure, or in terms of opportunity, or who are you willing to potentially take money from. You need to get the messaging right, think longer term, and we talked about that already, how that situation is going to impact your business. Identify options on the table. How much do you need? Can you pivot the offering? Can you reframe your situation right now, which we've talked about right now, but reframe your offering structure as well as your operating structure. So in some ways, we're doing a lot of these things right now. We are seeing where we can reposition and maybe reconfigure some of our roadmap to adjust to an environment like the one that we're in now. So maybe it's about prioritizing future solutions that you're building out. What are some of the more value-added components that will be necessary now? Then you want to think about how much you need is really important. But then presenting that cash position and that data accurately. Cash flow concerns take precedent. You want to focus on increasing your runway and extending that as much as possible. Right now, we have an unprecedented opportunity that's forcing us to focus on the necessities like never before. A lot of businesses are figuring out, like ourselves, that we don't need certain things. Maybe our workspace is too large, perhaps. So where are there ways that you can modify your structure going forward? You want to think about these types of things. Presenting your cash and data accurately. Evidence of stable and growing revenue is paramount if you have that. But then there's going to be a realistic run rate and burn rate that needs to be addressed as well. Whatever your stable and growing revenue was before this, it doesn't matter what product you have, almost all of those will be lower now. You want to have the ability to provide all this information to that investor might need up front and make it easy for them to access it. It goes back to this point of making it easy. You make it easy for people to do things, well then they're more likely to carry those out. On valuation, we're not going to be in a strong position to negotiate in this environment, so don't make it worse by coming out with something that's, again, unrealistic. I just talked about your run rate revenue. That's guaranteed to be impacted, so make sure you've addressed that. And that goes back to that COVID-19. Make sure you're addressing it. Your valuation is likely to drop or possibly stay flat. That's a good outcome here. Cash is good. Greed is bad. Do what's necessary to get through this. 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Right? Structuring makes sense. Be realistic. Be prepared. Can you use a bridge to get to your next raise? Do you need to raise right now? Maybe look for like a bridge, and that could come through a convertible, or a convertible to some of your larger shareholders, or just issue convertibles. And generally speaking, they're similar to, or ASAs, advanced subscription agreements. ASA, something you should think about here, an ASA is equity because it automatically converts. There's also SEIS and EIS eligibility around an ASA, while a convertible will actually be treated as debt. So make sure that you know what security or what instrument you want to be able to issue. Some of the good things about convertibles and ASAs is you're deferring that valuation to a later date. So it gives you more time to negotiate, but also more time to potentially reach that more attractive valuation. So it buys you time is what that does. So if somebody's willing to take that investment, do not pull that off the table. Have all options available. So the fundraising recap here, and you want to explore all your options. Government schemes out there, make sure you're using those, whether that's furloughing employees for the time being, restructuring. Look at everything that you have at your disposal. Reduce the complexity. Make it easy for people to give you money. Timing, keep it clean. Don't leave your rounds open-ended. Get funds in while you can. Some of these guys, the one client that we had was, did cut his round short. He had a structure where they could raise, and they decided not to try to go for more money, and they closed the round and took what was on the table. Don't be greedy, but make sure that those funds are what you need in the short term, medium term. Structuring correctly ties back into everything here, being reasonable on valuation, conversions, and discounts. Maximize your resources, whether that's using platforms to boost efficiency or existing shareholders or networks. Try to maximize all of your resources at your disposal, and that ties back into going to your network. Speak to your lead investors right now. Let them know. You should have already let them know what you're doing, but let them know that you've made modifications. Everybody in this environment probably, or should be, I don't want to say, a lot of firms are already restructuring. There's salary reductions, furloughing people, cutting expenses anywhere you can, throwing the weights off of that, the life raft type of thing, right? You're taking on water, you got to pail water out. Don't add weight right now. You want to make sure your investors are aware of all of this. It'll make them more comfortable, and then that they also then become more willing to help. But those people have a vested interest in you. I guarantee they have no interest in losing their investment if you're in a positive position. So that's just about general ideas around fundraising. And now here's how you can use some of those resources and tools. And this is where we get into the digital component around fundraising and some of what we do in digitising fundraisers and also the securities administration around it. So, by digitizing the process, you can add resources to your team, compress workflow, which increases efficiency and lowers cost around a raise. Regulation. A platform like ours or other platforms, just make sure that you're keeping within the regulatory context of the environment that you're in. So you want to hand over that regulatory process, allow the platform to manage those overheads for you. It keeps you within a ring-fenced, defined parameters. And that's one of the things that a digital platform can do. A platform like ours codes in all of the regulatory requirements, but then also the specific requirements around your fundraise. It's a digital subscription, entirely digital process, which includes both the subscription and the offering documentation. So that kind of pain point is taken away. There's no emailing out of the PDF of the overview deck. You're directing everybody to one place where everything can be handled there, from the full end-to-end of KYC, AML onboarding, which we'll talk about now, all the way through to the subscription agreements and the issuance of those actual shares. Automated AML KYC are important, and as are investor suitability checks. So you can offload those. We handle investor suitability across 53 geographies at the moment. So that's where we classify an investor, whether they are retail or high net worth. So the various classifications of an individual or a retail investor has different requirements across different jurisdictions. You can handle that. There's the order book management as well. The platform manages all of your incoming orders, and you can allow your investors to participate in multiple currencies, multiple fiat currencies, and that FX burden can be handled by a platform. You don't have to go out and start converting euros into pounds and handling all of that and losing money and engaging with your banks and making sure that they got the bank account right and all these types of information. So, all of that is handled by the platform. And that's where our platforms like ours or others have custody, but escrow services that are used to kind of complete that whole process. So it becomes kind of an end-to-end turnkey solution, which can be really effective in an environment like this. So you can create all of the rules and restrictions that you want around an offering. You can say, I don't want anyone from the United States to participate in this offering because you don't want to engage with the SEC. Well, then anyone who is from that region would not be able to view the offering docs. You can permission access it as you wish. So there is that flexibility, and then it also flows into streamlining your filing requirements. The next side of that is, so what do you do after you've actually issued a security? And there's that entire fundraising component, which can be very manual. So if we just go back to that for a second, this traditionally it's done using multiple parties. There's usually individuals that have to handle that onboarding and the KYC element on a standalone basis. You can onboard accredited investors under 501(d) categorization for the United States. You can collect that attestation so that it captures the actual digital verification of that individual, instead of you having to send documentations off to him and then creating a PDF and scanning it back to you and you keeping it somewhere. You have that all in one place. So it becomes very efficient when you can use these digital platforms. You're offloading all of the administrative workflow towards to that. So then it goes into digital cap tables, allows you to manage that ongoing securities lifecycle with ease. By creating a natively digital security, you make your life easier. And I can talk about what we mean by natively digital security. Here, the platform handles the registry management, but it's an entirely digital and fully automated cap table management and shareholder registry tool, but it goes well beyond that as well. You have the ability to manage your employee share options in the same place because they are completely correlated and tied into your company structure. This goes back into the fundraising component. So, when you do have shares, so that's one way that you can compensate employees. If you do need to reduce salaries in this time to make your cost structure more efficient, well, then you have share options that you can issue out to your employees. Those need to be done correctly, and you need to set up an EMI option plan for the UK, and you can offload a lot of that onto a digital platform as well that handles all of that record keeping and the certification, because it's really important, obviously, as everyone knows, to keep this information accurate and correct. In the end, a cap table or your share structure is what defines the ownership of your company. You can also handle corporate actions by creating a digital security. So performing actions such as a stock split or a buyback or drag along clauses can all be done with a few clicks. And then your investor holdings get updated in real time. We generate share certificates that are digital, so they are auto-generated on any action. So if there is a split and there's a reduction in share count, well, then that investor's share certificate is just automatically updated. Or if you do create transfer of shares, well, then those can also be handled via the platform. It becomes very efficient. You can handle shareholder communications all in one place and message investors securely, and that comes with that full audit trail. You can also, when you have a digital security, because all this is coded in and ties back into one platform, so distributions become very easy. If it's a bond instrument or if it's an equity instrument and you need to pay out a coupon or a dividend, well, then those can be just digitally processed because the platform automatically knows who's on that digital register, and because the shares have carry in that self-encapsulated coding, identifying which shares are entitled to dividends and what that pro rata component is, well, you can make the distribution to those individuals very easy. So again, it's a back office admin tool. workflow reduction. Voting can also be handled via the platform and executed. Investors can electronically submit responses and the platform tracks that in real time. So if you are then passing through like a share split or a stock split, well then if that does get approved and your articles do need approval from shareholders to carry those out, then you can carry them out. And as soon as that share vote is completed, again, a few clicks on the platform and you've executed that. So we apply the blockchain for the administrative layer as opposed to the transactional component, although we do have transactional elements in there. That's where the benefit of digitizing a security and asset comes in. And we can talk about that a little bit later. So the big advantage of using blockchain is that you can transfer private assets right now with no humans required, whether that's immediate settlement finality, so that transferability, you can facilitate one-to-one transfers for smaller assets, or through an auction facility that's also available via our platform and other platforms. And that's one of the main points of creating a natively digital instrument, is that the digital assets prove direct ownership. And then by that transfer of that digital instrument transfers that legal settlement as well, which is rather important. We talked about some of the self-encapsulated coding, so things like regulatory checks, regulatory restrictions and limitations of the security itself. So platforms, you can code in your articles of association and all the rules of a security into that natively digital instrument, which makes the admin of it incredibly simple going forward. And an immutable audit trail, of course, is one of the benefits of blockchain. And over there, you're on the right, there's an example of private blockchain that we use private blockchain on our own platform. Company investors engage directly into the transaction record, which then sits side by side with a digital register, and that's what completes that process. So it's the side by side records that read and write to each other, and one carries all of the transactions and engagements with an investor, and the other one carries the actual coding of the restrictions around the share itself or rules of the share itself. And then you're future-proofing by using blockchain. This is an example of what connectivity to public markets could look like. If you have custodians, registrars, and CSDs and exchanges all sitting on the same blockchain operating different nodes, well then clearing and settling and transferability, or even everything from issuance of public securities, can also be streamlined. And you have this benefit already in private capital markets using our structure, which doesn't really exist. There's no efficiency in transferring a private asset. It's very manual with the process, but public markets can even become more efficient. And I think that's where we've reached the end. Erica, if you want to.
Oh, no, brilliant. Are you at Globacap in building out automated secondary transfers?
So right now we have an ability to direct transfer a security between two individuals. So if I wanted to transfer it to Erica, we could complete that settlement and legal transfer. We are currently building out the auction facility that will allow private assets to remain private and be transferred between any registered users in Globacap. That'll be deployed in 3Q. So we're currently finalizing some of the legal mapping out of that using our existing regulatory licenses. We'll be able to complete that. So we do not envision needing to be an ATS or have an MTF kind of authorization. And it's part of our longer term vision, where we believe that the use of digitizing securities allows companies to actually stay private for longer, and combining this flywheel of issuance, admin, and then you can flow back into issuance.
A lot of startups have been asking us about where to go for fundraising. Where would you recommend people start looking for investment?
Well, I guess it depends on what stage you are in your startup cycle. There are some grant programs. So for companies that are a bit more advanced, and if you already have, if you've been in operations for over a certain period of time, the UK government has some grants available. There are also some new initiatives that are just being kind of publicized this last week in terms of funds that are being distributed to startups. I think you need to go to your existing network of if you have shareholders, like I said, go out to those shareholders, get in touch with them, get in touch with your network and use your resources as much as you can. It depends. If you are looking for crowdfunding, well, then there are crowdfunding solutions available as well. What we do is we allow you to kind of take control of your full end-to-end private placement. And we do have a network of investors that are part of Globacap, and then they can be invited to view your offering. But I think, you know, fundraising is one of those things that's incredibly difficult, and there's always that human element and human touch. Again, it's about structuring it correctly to make it attractive.
Are you connected to any currency hedge solution? If somebody's got an investor coming from US dollars but investing in pounds, how would you suggest they hedge the currency with derivatives?
Well, we don't use derivatives. We handle that ourselves. So we provide that service to the investor. Any issuer on our platform doesn't take the risk. Globacap takes the risk. We build in a slight spread, and then there's also a time frame which we are honoring that FX spread. So the way that we structure it, it's an engagement between ourselves directly and the investor. So if a company was raising in GBP, you could allow them to pay in US dollars or in euros, and we handle that for them. We don't need to get involved with derivatives. We build in a bit of spread, and then we assess what that risk component is, and we narrow down the window for them to make the transfer.
Okay, thank you.
Cost is borne by the investor. I should highlight that.
Okay. Can you give an idea of what the costs are?
Oh, what you're asking. So we build in a bit of a spread, and it depends on the volatility in the environment, but it can be anywhere from kind of like 1 to even 3%.
Where does your platform stand in novel vehicles such as P2P, crowdfunding, or even ICOs?
So in terms of, we have a fully operational platform that's used for private placements. We had a client that was a merchant bank that was doing a $1.5 million raise to shore up capital requirements. They have a regulatory capital requirement, and they are the individuals that then ended up completing a £650,000 raise. Again, I guess where are we in terms of P2P? Well, we have over 1,200 registered investors on the platform, and that grows every time that there's an offering done. We are an administrative turnkey solution that is based on a fixed fee structure depending on your raise and what that looks like. So in terms of crowdfunding, we do have an ability to handle EIS and SEIS. It's not our let's say focus or solution, nor is that really the segment of perhaps companies that we're looking to engage with raises, but anyone can use our platform to run an end-to-end raise, and it's rather cost effective. If you compare when we first raised, Miles and I first raised money from friends and family, and we managed to raise $300,000. That was the first money that we ever took from our network, and that was pure friends and family. So back to the previous question of who you can go for, like really you do go to anybody. If people believe in you and trust you, you have that ability. Creating our share register and issuing all the share certificates and all of the admin around that was rather expensive when we raised the $300,000. Creating articles, so a lot of that is templated. I mean, we spent around £12,000 doing that. So there is a solution.
Thank you. From a regulatory standpoint, does your platform allow us to use social, or allow people to use social media to market the offering? And is that even allowed? I'm guessing is that even allowed? It relates to crypto markets in general, given certain bans around advertising on social media.
So a lot of the yes, our platform will make sure that your offering is regulatory compliant. The people that are engaged with the offering are actually allowed to engage with that offering. And in terms of marketing, so one of the authorizations or licenses that we carry from the FCA, so I should start, sorry, we are completely regulated as a arranger of investments and transactions, which carries a broker-dealer component in there. And in that capacity, we are able to approve financial promotions. So that's a UK requirement. That's where we can engage with some of our issuers. So if they wanted to put something out in the general public in terms of an advertisement, or let's say using social media, that's where we would engage with them and guide them. So there are things you can say, like, we are fundraising. That's a very different statement than we're raising 5 million for 10% equity. You know, the 5 million for 10% equity falls into a different category of kind of making an offering. So that's where we work with some of our clients and just review marketing messages that they want to send out, and where and when they need to be approved as a financial promotion. That's when then we review it and make adjustments. So the answer, sorry, is yes.
Okay. No.
I didn't touch on the ICO thing.
Okay.
I think when our view on ICOs is when people are really creating a utility token, we can digitize any security or any asset really using our platform. If it's not a security, if it's not an equity instrument or a bond instrument, we don't tend to engage if it doesn't fall into one of those aspects, because we kind of view that anything that you will be issuing really falls in there, unless you actually do have some other kind of utility instrument that can be digitized. So we do have a capacity to do that. We just don't tend to.
Mm-hmm. Can your platform help with due diligence and legal documentation?
So we do, yes. The way that we engage on the due diligence is as part of the onboarding process to engage with you directly. There's an onboarding due diligence form. We also carry out DD of your offering itself. The deal pages need to be approved. It's part of our requirement, our licenses. We need to approve them to be clear, not factually clear and not misleading. So yes. Legal documentation, we provide some templated, basically in terms of the offering docs, the subscription agreement. They come templated on our platform.
Do you have any white label solution for asset management firms?
Yes, we are engaged with a few institutional capital markets firms, institutional players, and where we are engaging in white label solutions for them. So asset management firms have two main requirements. They have a portfolio of companies. So we provide a solution where they can digitize all of the structures of their companies and view them under a portfolio view, which is also, you know, part of the benefits of digitizing and creating security tokens, or people refer to them as digital securities, which we prefer. And then they also want to syndicate investments. So a lot of times the portfolio companies will be leading a round, and then they want to put that round out to the general public. So yes, we do have solutions. We can engage on a one-on-one basis or white label it for certain entities.
Okay, no, perfect, thank you. And does your platform include turnkey articles of association and legal?
We do have some templated articles, and like I said, some out of the box subscription and offering solutions. So yes, we do a cursory review of your articles to begin with, and then we make certain modifications or review of your articles to make sure that they allow for the full benefits of the structure of our platform. So where articles may include wet ink signatures, we have those removed, so the entire process can be digitized, everything from communication and actually executing shareholder voting.
And then if there is an ICO or of a utility token which is approved and regulated by a G7 country, would you engage in that ICO sale?
If it was, yes, we will engage with any offering structure that I would say makes sense.
Do you have a written guide of what companies can do to make sure that they're as attractive as possible to investors?
We do have some marketing and sales collateral in terms of guidelines. There's also an FAQ section on the website. There are a few articles that we've written that are also available on the website, general kind of guides and thoughts and ideas.
Okay, no, thank you. And what about people investing in crypto if investors wanted to invest in crypto instead of in fiat?
So it's an interesting question. We actually have that functionality. We've disabled it for the time being.
Okay. Why?
The custody banks, it's very difficult to get them to understand what that means, that we're not taking any that we're actually not engaging in a crypto asset. It's just being used as a method of transfer. So for the time being, we've disabled that until the banks can be comfortable with crypto being used. And so what I mean by that is, Erica, if you had crypto, so we've onboarded you, we know where the source of funds are coming from you, and we've identified all of those, and they fit within your kind of income and economic profile. If you're making just a $10,000 investment, if you're transferring like 2 million of Ether over to us, $2 million worth, well, then we might ask you, well, where's the $2 million coming from? But so legally it's the same. It's just that they don't like crypto and that risk right now.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Print it off.
What is the lower bar in terms of businesses that you can help? Lots of small businesses may be interested, but don't know if they are large enough or if their investment required isn't big enough. Where do you start? Or is there also an upper bar? That is a good question.
There actually is no lower or upper bar. We're willing to provide, like I said, it's an admin solution, it's a template solution for anyone. There are different pricing tiers depending on engagement. So for lower end companies, and especially in this environment, we're willing to help and assist them. In terms of investment also, so when you use a digital structure, you can create the digital security that you really want to create, and there's no minimum investment. You can minimum as 1 share, or some people have put 1,000 or 10,000 pound limits on floor investments, but there's no upper limit. The one thing to consider when you are doing an upper limit, there are prospectus requirements that you need to keep in mind. And in general terms, it's about 8 million for the EU and UK.
Yeah, that is actually a good question. And through the Curries, we've had a lot of questions coming up to me and Nikki, a lot of companies coming up to us and just saying they want to raise 10 grand or 20 grand or how to go about doing that, and often worry that they're not large enough to be taken seriously by investors.
Well, 10 or 20 grand, it's rather small, but that would probably be a very clean and simple offering, I would imagine. So there is a capacity, because we have that pure private placement. So it really allows you to kind of do what you want to do. By making it completely private, it really becomes your own, I don't want to say your own personal white label solution, but it diminishes the risk that allows us not to have to take certain fees on to carry that risk.
So thank you very much, Alex. Also, thank you very much everyone for joining.